My name is Asia Sampson, and today on Baptism Overland, we are installing and reviewing my new Front Runner Slimline II half rack for the Jeep JK. A couple months ago, I was standing outside of a restaurant when someone approached me about the Jeep, was looking at it, and started inquiring about the roof rack that I had on there, which was the Garvin Expedition roof rack. So I tell him I was actually considering selling it. I had bought it off somebody and it had treated me really well from the time that I bought it, but my needs have changed since then, and there were just other features that I was looking for in a roof rack that this one wasn't giving me. And he says to me, okay, well, if you do plan to sell it, this is my card, this is my number. Give me a call if you decide to. So I started mulling it in my head that, what would happen if I actually did sell this roof rack? I'd have to take everything down and there are going to be some holes that I have to plug up. Is it really going to be worth it? So I texted him, I said, hey, I'm selling my roof rack, the whole rack plus wind deflector, $900, which is about, I don't know, $800 less than what you would get if you bought it brand new. And my roof rack was in great condition still. And he said, all right, let me go check it out. Came to my house, looked at it, said, yep, I think I'll take it. And then a couple days later, he came back with a trailer. We took the rack off and he went away. And then my Jeep looked very naked for a couple of days. But with that money, I was able to finally get the roof rack that I've been eyeing, and it came in and we installed it today, and it is the Front Runner Slimline II half rack. So why the half rack? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, I was debating between half rack and full rack, and I had a full rack before, and I thought, okay, let's go get a full rack. Problem is, full rack is always sold out. So that pretty much helped me make my decision to go get the half rack. I mean, I could wait, but at the same time, there's a $600 difference around there between the half rack and the full rack. And did I really need a full rack this time? Through these past years, as I've been loading up my roof rack, I realized I haven't really loaded up that much that it will warrant a full rack. There's not a lot of stuff I put up there, so I think a half rack will do me just fine. And when I do decide to get a rooftop tent and put it on top, then it doesn't really matter if I have the half rack or the full rack. It's just going to be wasted space at that point because I can put a rooftop tent on any of them. And I do have my eye on something, which I hope I'll be able to get, and you'll see a video on that. All right, so why switch? A couple of reasons. Number one, T-slot system. I've been wanting a roof rack with a T-slot system because it makes mounting things on them so much more easier. The T-slot system has a groove along each of the rails, and you just slide in a nut, put it in there, mount whatever, tighten it, and then the groove will hold that nut in place and you'll be able to tighten things down on there and all that. So it makes it so much easier to have a T-slot system to put all sorts of accessories. That being said, number two, Front Runner has a ton of accessories for their roof rack. Like every time I see ads, when I had my Garvin Expedition roof rack, I'm like always so jealous. Like, oh, look at these mounts and look at all these things. And if you've watched my past videos, you'll know that I'm DIYing mounts all the time and I'm just tired of making mounts. It'd be nice to just buy a mount, put it on there, and it installs easily without me having to do much. They have a ton of stuff, and I just love their lineup. Now I can basically get a mount for anything. Reason number three is in the event that I get a rooftop tent. A rooftop tent on the Garvin Expedition roof rack, because the Garvin Expedition has walls along the side, which means that if I wanted to put a rooftop tent on there, I'd have to buy some crossbars. The crossbars will sit at the very high end of the wall, go across, and I put the rooftop tent on that, and then add that to the height of the walls already itself. I mean, I'm just getting taller and taller and taller, and yeah, it's just not looking good to have it that way. The Slimline, however, has no walls. I mean, it has a tiny bit, and if I put a roof rack tent on top of that, it's going to be a lot lower. That's reason number four, which is this is a Slimline kit, which means it's sleek, it's slim, it's not protruding so high up. Fifth reason, weight. The Garvin Expedition roof rack weighed about 135 pounds. And when we were taking it off, I remembered exactly how heavy it was. I mean, my God, it's like steel, and it carries only 500 pounds of static weight 300 dynamic, and yet it weighs 135 odd pounds. It's heavy. This rack, 67 pounds. Just today, when we were installing the rack on top of this Jeep, I was like, I can carry this by myself. It was that light. And it kind of makes you wonder, well, how is it able to hold so much weight? And yet, Front Runner says that their load capacity static is somewhere around 670 pounds, I believe. And that's a lot, which means that I can put a lot of stuff up there. I can put my rooftop tent on there. My whole family can sleep in there. Because if I were to load up the same things on the Garvin Expedition roof rack, which is already 135 pounds, I'm getting to that point where I'm very, very top heavy, and that can get a little dangerous. But now I have a slimmer roof rack, much lighter. Everything will be much lower. I'm not as top heavy, tons of accessories to put on it. And now I can just mount things so easily using the T-slot system. All of that is a win. And then as a bonus, the way this mounts to the vehicle, it doesn't mount by pillars on the outside of the vehicle. It's mounted to your roll cage. So you know you're getting a really strong foundation there, and it just goes through the roof and you are set and good to go. Like, I love that aspect of it. So that's why I went with it. I mean, it's a no-brainer. After putting out the pros and cons of switching out my roof rack, there were just way too many pros that I couldn't pass it up. And so now I'm glad I have it. So let's go ahead and let me show you how we install this thing today. The really good thing about Front Runner is that when they deliver everything to you, everything is sectioned off and organized extremely well, which is like awesome for my OCD, because they make sure everything is packaged just right. You open it up and then you'll know what you need. So for example, for the inside mounts of the roof rack, it all comes in this bag, and then all the rest of the hardware are in other bags. So they really do a good job of separating everything for you. So right now, this is what we're going to be installing today. Here's your hardware. Here are the mounts that hold your roof rack to your roll cage inside the vehicle. And then this is what wraps around that roll cage. And as always, it's good practice to take out all your hardware, separate them. That way you can see exactly what you're looking at and you know exactly what is in the kit, and count them and make sure you have everything there. This is a pretty nice touch to give you a note telling you who packed your roof rack. Cute. Okay, so both rails are installed. Here's the left side,
and then coming over, right side is right there. That's all locked in to the inside of the roll cage, but you don't want to tighten them yet, because once we get the rack finished and put on top, we will adjust these to make it all fit. And as far as the rack is right here. We're going to start putting it together now. So we have one side dedicated to the front, and then the other side is the back. All right, so here's the rack pretty much loosely installed. It's super easy. Because it's not the full rack, we don't have the extension part that we have to put together. It's literally your sides and your middle, front and back. And that's really it. The Front Runner has alternating slots, so you can configure this any way you want, or you can buy more panels if you want to make it really flat and add more in between them. But this is going to be just perfect for me because there's not a lot of things I'm installing up there that will require a super flat surface. So that's it. We're going to tighten all this up, and then when we're ready, go ahead and put it to the roof. All right, so corners are super easy as well. We went ahead and flipped the rack right side up because we had it upside down to put in all those bolts. So when you put in the corners, just make sure you are orientating them correctly as well, because the corners do have a logo on it. So it's simple. This goes in right there. There's a nut cert already in there. Put in your bolt and you're done. All right, with the corners in place, we turned it upside down again, and now we will just lock down all the panels. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and put the wind deflector on. Front Runner actually gives you two pairs. One is a thinner lip, and we are gonna go with the wider lip, which is like right here. So you can choose what's best for your application. Comes in two parts, so you just put them in the rail as well. Just FYI, make sure that before you put the wind deflector on, and this is very important, is to slide in these bolts already, because this is going to grip the rails that are on your roof right now. So make sure you slide these in before you attach the wind deflector, because once you put the wind deflectors on, you won't be able to get this in anymore because the channel is right there. So put them on, then put the wind deflector on, and then you are done.
Hold on one second. And that's done. I had to go buy more mounts and accessories because it looks awesome. I think it needs more stuff. Maybe. I love this roof rack. It fits the look of everything. And I mean, it's only a half rack, which means now I have access to my Freedom panels again. So especially on nice days, I can take the panels off of my roof and have open air. Like, oh man, I'm glad. I'm so glad I switched over. Yeah, it was a pain in the butt, take off the old rack and then have to install a brand new one, but it was so worth it. I mean, this rack was great. Okay, so some pros. Well, first of all, like we mentioned already, T-slot system, tons of accessories, super light, and also it is very, very low on your Jeep. It's not going to be super high. It's very slim, and it's called Slimline. for a reason, and it looks good this way. And yeah, I'm just glad that it just looks has that nice cleaner profile on it than what I had before. As far as cons are concerned, there's not really much. The only thing is I wish that the whole thing was flat at the top. When I was shopping roof racks, I honestly thought that it was going to be completely flat, like from the end lip of the rack to the rails that are going across it. I thought it was just going to be a flat piece, but it looks like there is a tiny bit of a wall. I don't even think it's about an inch. It's really minuscule, but because of that wall, it makes it hard for me to mount certain things to the edges of it. So for example, my awning, I wanted to put my L brackets up there, but because of that lip, I won't be able to put that awning bracket in there and have it kind of protrude out and put the awning on there. It's going to bump up against that little tiny lip. And the lip is good, I guess, if you're putting cargo, so that, you know, there's an extra piece of railing to kind of help hold in everything, and it's not just going to fall out the sides. But it does make it hard for me to put that L bracket on there. So that's why I went ahead and just ordered some awning brackets that they have on Front Runner that I will be able to put on my awning, which is actually cleaner too, because it'll kind of sit along the sides of it nice and flush and flat. So I like that option. All those channels and grooves for you to put bolts through, they are M8 bolts, which is fine. M8 bolts are thick. You can put them in there and then they're robust. Problem with that though is that the screw itself a lot of times is much bigger than the mounts that you might get from other companies that you're putting it on. For example, my chase light bracket, those brackets have holes for you to mount them to a roof rack, but they're smaller. So the M8's not gonna fit. So I have to bore out the hole a little bit bigger, which is not a big deal. I just have to go through all my mounts and kind of make them a little bit bigger, which again, if I were to put my L brackets for my awning up there, the holes on those also won't fit an M8 bolt. So I don't know, maybe if they would have just gone one size smaller, like an M6 T-slot system for certain accessories, then that would have been easier to get. But speaking of screws, what I love about Front Runner is that all the parts that they give you are not Front Runner specific, which means that if you're missing a bolt, missing some screws, you can easily go get them at your local hardware store. You know, they're like your standard M8, M6 bolts, nuts, washers, that type of thing. So you don't have to get specialized parts for this thing. They made it so that it can basically work with a lot of systems that are out there. They're not caring much about how you put things on there as long as it works and it's tight. So they give you the option of buying certain mounts from other companies and things like that that will work on this. Not only do they already give you a great product line of stuff you can put on their roof rack, it's almost, you can pretty much get the same kind of accessories from other companies and use it on their rack. As far as installation is concerned, this was not the hardest thing ever to install, but it also wasn't the easiest. There were definitely some areas that were very challenging and got very frustrating very quickly. In fact, I filmed this video only after doing the second part of this roof rack, because the first part, the first rail that I had put up, I knew that I was going to need that time to get my bearings, figure things out. I knew I was going to make some mistakes. That way, when I film the second half, I have already learned from those mistakes and you can see how I did it and how smooth it is. But there were definitely some challenges during that first half, and so I'll share those with you now so you don't make the same mistakes, or if you run into the same problems, you'll know what to do. First off, in the front bolts, the mount that you have there on the very front of the rack, you have to take a long bolt, go through your roll cage, come out on the other side, and then that bolts into the mount that holds the front part of your roof rack. Well, I put the bolt up there and then completely forgot to put a washer. Kind of one of those things I overlooked because I was rushing, but you need to put a washer there because that hole has a little bit of an indentation, and when you put a bolt through, you need that washer to kind of secure it in place. So don't forget to do that. I forgot to put a washer there, then I had already sort of somewhat tightened things down and I had to take it back off and then kind of redo it all over again. So that was the one thing. Second thing is the brackets in the back. The brackets that hold your roll cage in the back to the roof rack. It's like this flat bracket. When I did one side, it sat really flush to the roof. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. Because inside the rooftop of your Jeep, there are some ridges. And it was supposed to fall on one of the lower parts of the ridge, and so it sat there nice. However, on the other side, it wasn't lining up to that bottom part of that ridge. It was kind of lining up to where the ridge starts to go upwards. And so there was a huge gap. And I'm like, this can't be right. I'm like, it's supposed to sit on the lower part of it to the right of it. And for some reason, it wasn't there. And I said, is my hard top just kind of skewed? Like, did I bend it, or kind of distort it through time? And I know it's not that. And so I'm like, all right, well, let me just trust it. Maybe this is where it's supposed to go. So I, put my marks there, drilled through. Then when I got to the top, then those holes ended up along the slope of that ridge. And I'm like, yeah, you can't put mounts there because it'll be like crooked. So I'm like, all right. So I realized that here's what you need to do. It does tell you this in the instructions too. Don't tighten everything. Keep things sort of somewhat loose still, because you can actually get that bracket and push it a little bit if it's not hitting the lower end of that ridge. You can manipulate it, figure out where it goes, put your marks, drill through there, and then mount. And when that's all mounted, then you can tighten everything and there's some play. So there is some play. I just didn't think it was, because you're supposed to put that bracket straight through the clamps on your roll cage, and it sandwiches it. And I thought it just has to go straight up. I didn't realize there could be a little bit of play. And if you just leave it loose on those clamps, then you can kind of move it a little bit, mark everything, tighten those tops, and then you can tighten the bottom, and it's perfect. So I did that, and now everything is tight and snug and secure. But I do have two tiny pilot holes, but that's easy enough to fix. I'm just gonna get some caulk and put it in there, and you'll never even notice. So at least it wasn't humongous holes, right? Because then that would have been a pain in the butt to try to cover, especially when it starts to rain. Like, you don't want to make that kind of mistake. Otherwise, those are the only challenges I had. Everything else after that was just downhill. It was just like a breeze, because putting the rack together itself was super simple. I just showed you a time lapse. I didn't even need to explain a lot, because it just goes together really nicely. And then at the top, as long as everything still kind of keeps loose, you can drop your rack in there. Make sure that the bolts are in on the side rails that's holding it. Then you can kind of move the rack right and left until you know it's centered to the vehicle. Then go around and tighten everything down. I would suggest tightening all the inside bolts first that are inside the vehicle, so that you know that those rails that are holding that rack is perfectly straight and where you want it to be after you've dropped the rack on there. Then that way it won't shimmy and move out of position. So get that lined up, locked in, then go ahead and tighten the ones that hold the roof rack to it. They do tell you to take it out, go drive around, go on an adventure, and then come back and retighten everything in case things got loosened up, especially if you're going off-roading and things like that. Things will start to loosen up. Tighten it back up and you should be good. But anyway, that's it for the install and review of the Front Runner Slimline II system. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please hit that like button. Also subscribe to our channel, and if you want, follow us on Patreon. Just look for Baptism Overland. Help to fund this channel so that we can continue doing work for y'all. And one last thing, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Baptism Overland. My name is Asia Sampson, and I will see you next time.